Hey everybody, and welcome to week 9. Wow, we're really getting far now, close to the end of Unit 2 already. It's going to be a pretty easy day, although I do have something a little bit different planned for us today, as you can see. First we're going to start with the normal rhythm warm-up focused on syncopation. We're going to visit the next chord family. We're going to actually skip over a little bit on the circle, and we're going to visit the inverse of last week's chord family. We're going to visit the black, white, black family and their relative minors. All right, we're going to do our inversion exercises with those. We're going to check out the scales that are associated with them. And then I think you'll notice that I don't have sight reading on the list today. Every now and then I think it's good to maybe, not do some sight reading and look at something else that's fun. So today we're going to be talking about intervals, all right? All things intervals and how we can train our ears to better recognize those intervals. So we're going to do a little bit of aural training today, okay? So without further ado, let's go ahead and head on over to the drum and start our rhythmic warm-up. Okay, here we are with our week 9 rhythm warm-up. Now, we're actually almost finished with this second unit, and once we do that, now that we've added the layer of doing every other upbeat with the metronome, starting in Unit 3 in about 2 more videos, we're actually going to be speeding the metronome up even more and practicing syncopation at a little bit faster tempos. But for today, we're going to continue with the normal routine. We're going to start with our metronome at 40 BPM. It's going to represent the downbeats, and we're going to get started now on line 1. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3. Switch your hands. 1, and 2, and 3, 4. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3. Top line hands together. 1, and 2, and 3, 4. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. Now we're going to speed our metronome up to 45 BPM, and the click is going to represent the upbeat. Watch out, I left a lot of space in this one. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, and 2, 3, and 4. 1, and 2, 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and switch hands. 1, 2, and 3, 4. 1, and 2, 3, and 4. 1, and 2, 3, 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and hands together, top line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we have it. Okay, we're going to speed our tempo up to 50 BPM and move our metronome to half time, which means it will be at 25 while we are at 50. It will now represent every other upbeat, starting with the first and the third upbeat. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 1, 2, and switch your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3, and top line. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. 1, 2, and 3, and 4. All right. And last but not least, line 4, we are going to speed the metronome up to 30, which means our tempo will be 60. It will represent now the upbeat of the 2 and the 4, the second and the fourth upbeat. Now, you will also notice on this one that I just put a bunch of quarter notes because I want you to remember that as good as you get at syncopation, all right, and as fancy of rhythms as we are going to do together, sometimes as a musician, it is your job to play quarter notes. And when you play those quarter notes, you got to like it and you got to make it sound great, all right? So this is just a reminder that, you know, we can't forget about playing quarter notes because sometimes that's the most important thing for us to do from time to time. So on this last line, we're going to have a little fun with quarter notes and we're just going to get into it. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Change hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Hands together. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There we go. And now we're all rhythmically warmed up. Let's head back to the piano. Okay, now that we're all warmed up, let's take a look at these black, white, black chords. Now the first thing what we're going to do is we're going to take a look on our circle of fifths. And here we are, right here in the blue family, all right? And before we get started, let's go ahead and name the relative minors of these three keys, all right? So if we think about D flat, and we think about the sixth note, well, if you look over here, because remember, we always want to use what we've already got. As musicians, we want to not think too much, right? Work smarter, not harder. So we already have a lot of information. And if you look over here, you notice that the relative minor of D is B. So if you just slap some flats on those, then you've got the relative minor of D flat, right? D flat, B flat, right? Now that you have gotten that point of reference, you can say, well, what's the fifth note of B flat? Because now we can just think in something that we're a little bit more attuned with, right? Which is fifths. So we look over here and we see our B flat and our F. So we know that the sixth note of A flat must be F, right? Now, there's nothing wrong with going A flat, B flat, C, D flat, E flat, F, right? Or even looking down at the keyboard and looking at that. But it's always fun to see if we can use this system that we're building to recall these things, all right? And of course, the fifth of F is C, all right? So actually, although we're getting into these very black note scales and the black, white, black chords over here, the relative minors are actually some familiar friends of ours. So without further ado, let's take a look at the keyboard and put our hands on these chords. Okie dokie. Let's start things with D flat major, all right? Left hand. And now we're going to do hands together. All right, now let's go down to La. There we have our B flat minor. Okay, we're going to come up. Let's do our left hand. And hands together. All right, let's move on to A flat major. Here we are. Right hand first. Now our left hand. And hands together. Now from A, we're going to move down to La, A flat down to La. Okay, so we'll start that F minor with our right hand. Looks like we have just enough keys for that. Let's do our left hand. And now let's do hands together. There we are. And that just leaves one more major key for us today, and that is E flat. So we'll start with our right hand as usual. Let's do the left hand. And then hands together. Drop down to La. We're going to do C minor now with our right hand. Left hand. And hands together. Now remember, for the sake of time in these videos, I'm moving at a nice steady pace through these inversions, but if you ever find yourself having any trouble and you need to break it down more on your right hand, more on your left hand, or maybe more on your hands together, feel free to go as slow and steady as you need to. Don't ever feel like you need to keep up with what I'm doing, all right? Now, for those of you who are feeling like this is very easy, let's go ahead and review these 6 scales really fast, all right? So we're going to start with our D flat major scale, hands together. Now we're going to go down to La. We're going to play the same scale, but from La to La. There we go. Let's check out A flat major. Down to La. And finally, let's look at that E flat major. Down to La. Okay, now that we're all done with our chord exercises, let's talk about intervals, all right? We've actually been talking about intervals for quite a while now. In fact, the very first thing that we did together was we found this interval right here, the half step, right? So we found the half step, and we also found the whole step. A little cleaner, right? But so we had the whole step, we had the half step, and when I just played those small step intervals, we also played them between a larger interval that we call the octave, right? So we've talked about from here to here, from C to D, and we've also talked from C to C, the octave, the minor second, and the major second, the octave, the half step, and the whole step, right? But there are actually unique intervals between the do and every note between that octave. And there are names for them all, okay? Whether it's on C or even A flat, right? Same sound, same names of intervals, same mathematical number of steps there, okay? So let's take a look at a chart today and see all the names of these intervals. All right, here's our chart, and I bet the first thing that jumps out to you are the emojis, all right? And that's the best part of the chart, so I'm going to save the best for last. I'm going to do a little explaining here before we get to those emojis, all right? Now, when you have a note with its same note, right? We're going to pretend like we always have two notes here. We start with the unison. We don't really have to worry too much about that. I hope that when you hear two people or two notes, two instruments playing the same note, we can tell that they're playing the same note, assuming they're in tune, right? And so once we get past that, we have the minor second and the major second, which we already know, the half step and the whole step, but then it gets pretty easy after that. We have the minor third and the major third, which we recognize at this point is what we've been working with chords, right? Now here's where it gets a little funky, but we have fourths and fifths being perfect. There's no major or minor perfect fourth or perfect fifth, and that's kind of convenient because that is how the circle operates, right? So if you're going in a fifth, you know you always move by a fifth. If you're moving in a fourth, you don't have to worry, is it a major fourth or a minor fourth? Fourths work one way, fifths work one way, and that's why it's a great idea to structure our circle with the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth. However, the interval in between is very interesting. We call that the tritone, all right? It's a very dissonant interval, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that dissonance in just a moment, all right? But once we get past the perfect fourth, the perfect fifth, and the tritone, we fall back into that minor and major pattern. We have the sixths, we have the sevenths, and then finally we have the octave, all right? Now, in this column right here, what we have is the number of half steps that are contained within each of those intervals, right? So it makes sense that the minor second is simply one half step. And this is a pretty useful thing to know, especially if you're going to be working with music technology, because a lot of times when you're doing pitch shifting and all those things with your music editing software, you are pitch shifting in half steps, and you're going to say, I want to pitch shift that thing, that one voice up a perfect fourth. Well, you're going to have to go 5 half steps with your pitch shifter, all right? So that's breaking these intervals down into the number of half steps inside of each of the intervals. And now finally, my favorite part, and that is the emojis, all right? So these emojis actually stand for songs. One of the easiest ways to train our ears about the sound of these chords is to associate them with famous songs and melodies that contain these intervals or start with them, okay? So what we have here for a minor second is a shark, because I think we all know that, right? The jaws, right? And so if you're ever trying to figure out what that minor second sounds like, you just think shark in the water, and there we have it, all right? Now the major second, we have a cupcake, because this is the birthday interval. Happy birthday is a major second, all right? Now when we get to our minor third, we've got the sleepy face, right? Because we have our lullaby, 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 All right. Now, major third, we have an angel because there's a famous song called When the Saints Go Marching In. You know? And it starts out, it ultimately does walk up a scale, but it starts with that third. So the angel represents when the saints go marching in. Right? Now we have a beautiful bride for our perfect fourth, okay? And that's because anytime you've ever stood while the bride walks down the aisle, you have stood up to the perfect fourth, all right? Now the tritone is very interesting because if you look at the number of half steps that it contains, it's 6. And this is actually a very old tradition, but you know, for a long time, hundreds of years, we're talking even before classical music, in Baroque music, or even Renaissance music, you know, the tritone was considered too dissonant. And the fact that it was constructed out of 6 half steps symbolized that, you know, 6 in biblical terms is usually associated with the devil, right? And so back in the day when music was mostly existing in churches and church choirs and Catholic masses, they would tend to avoid this interval that was associated with the devil, and you can kind of hear, right? And it's very dissonant. It's also, on a game show, a very good interval for if you got the question wrong. And your answer is incorrect. Right? So that's the tritone, lots of fun. All right, for the perfect fifth, we've got a little tiny star, all right? And that star is going to represent, everybody's favorite song about stars. Twinkle, twinkle. All right? Now, at the minor 6, we have the piano, right? That's kind of vague, but I think we all know the song The Entertainer. Right? That Scott Joplin tune. I love ragtime. I'm sure if you look through my recordings, you'll see I've recorded tons of ragtime and early jazz. It is one of my favorite types of music. And that minor 6 is right after, you have the chromatic notes at the first, but then that wide interval that you're going is that minor 6th, okay? Now for the major 6th, you can see that we have the peacock, because I think one of the most recognizable TV logo themes is the NBC, which they have the peacock, right? And you can go NBC, right? Just like that, okay? For the minor 7th, we have a spaceship, because on one of the very original Star Trek themes, we're talking original Star Trek, not Next Generation or any of the movies, although you can hear references back to this theme, but the minor 7th is the interval that we use for the Star Trek, the classic Star Trek theme. Right? Okay, excellent. Now, major 7th is a bit of a stretch. I didn't really find anything that wasn't specific to jazz or very specific to classical that was just sort of generally accepted. But there is a famous pop song from the 80s called Take On Me. So a singer with a microphone to symbolize an 80s singer. Take On Me, all right? And then finally, we have a beautiful octave rainbow, okay? And the octave rainbow is because everyone's favorite rainbow song is Somewhere Over the... Right? I'm not a singer, I'm a pianist here, right? So Somewhere Over the Rainbow is our octave, rounding us out at 12 half steps for you, okay? Now, I've also created something very useful for training our ear, okay? Because back in the day when I was going to school, I had to commute to go to music school 45 minutes every, both there and back, right? So I had a lot of time driving in my car to get to music school. And meanwhile, I was taking these ear training classes, and I really wanted to train myself to hear these intervals, right? So what I did is I recorded some examples. So for instance, the major second, we have the major second ascending. We have the major second just together. And then we have the major second descending. And then together, right? We have the minor third descending together and ascending together. We have the major third, right? Ascending, together, and descending, and together. All right, and so I actually made recordings of every single interval, ascending, descending, together, in all 12 keys. And this is the stuff that I will listen to for 45 minutes on my way to school, training my ears. And now I have made those recordings available for you on my website, on pianodojo.com. All right, so if you go to the store where you usually can shop for show notes, where all the show notes from today will be, you can also find these audio examples available for you at a very reasonable price, I would have to say. All right, so go and grab those recordings from the pianodojo.com store, and you can start your ear training on these intervals. And that's all we have for today. All right, we're going to take a little sight reading break, and next week will be our very last week on these basic chord inversions. All right, so we're almost finished with Unit 2 already. And happy practicing. I'll see you next week.